Sweetest Princess competition. Hi everybody, my name is Natasha and I'm dropping by with a piece of gossip I just picked up from the pond where Prince Bertie the frog lives. The other day I was just sitting in the orchard watching the wind blow through the trees when I caught sight of the lovely Princess Beatrice. She had come down to the palace to feed bread to the greedy little ducklings who live in the pond. Sadie, the beautiful black swan, didn't join in the unseemly rush for soggy food. Instead, she sat elegantly on the water, watching Princess Beatrice. Everyone who lives on the pond knows that there is no greater admirer of royalty than Sadie the swan. "Oh my," she sighed. "Isn't Princess Beatrice just the sweetest creature who ever lived?" Now, apart from me, the only person to hear Sadie say this was Colin the grumpy carp, and he lost no time in answering her question. "Rubbish," he said, sticking his not-too-pretty face out of the water. "That Beatrice is just putting on a show. She only pretends to be sweet to fool the masses and the dumb pond life." Now, there are times when Sadie would have turned and hissed at Colin so fiercely that he would have dived straight to the bottom of the pond. But she had to keep up appearances in the presence of somebody as lovely and royal as Princess Beatrice. And so she held her elegant neck aloft and ignored him, until Bertie the frog came hopping along from lily pad to lily pad. As you most probably know, before he was a frog, Bertie used to be a handsome prince and was engaged to be married to Princess Beatrice. Bertie is therefore considered to be something of an expert on matters royal. "Bertie," said Sadie, "tell this ignorant fish that Princess Beatrice is the loveliest and sweetest princess in the entire universe." "Well, of course," boomed Bertie. "Everybody knows that." "How do they know?" grumped Colin. "She's most probably just pretending to be sweet because a public relations manager told her to act that way. In my view, this royal thing is all just a sham. Royalty are no better than the rest of us. No better than the silliest tadpoles in the pond." "I know because she told me," answered Bertie. "And besides, I heard all about the Sweetest Princess contest she took part in when she was just a teenage trainee princess." "Oh, do tell us about it, Bertie," said Sadie. "Well," he said, hesitating, "the inside story is supposed to be a secret." Sadie huffed. "Dear frog, there are no secrets in this pond." "What about your age?" grumped Colin the carp. A question which Sadie ignored. And so Bertie started to tell the story of the Sweetest Princess. And I pricked my ears because I thought it might be very interesting. Some years ago, when the Princess Beatrice was still just a teenager, she lived in the palace with her father the king, who was very nice but very busy in the office, what with being a king and everything, and also with her stepmother, who wasn't so nice at all. Princess Beatrice was the sweetest little princess who ever lived. She spent her entire day combing her collection of pink and white fluffy bunnies and raising money to help look after small animals. Now, one day, Beatrice's stepmother read in the newspaper that a television company was organising a competition called "Who is the Sweetest Princess?" The prize was to be a free holiday on the most luxurious 10-star beach resort in the entire world. Beatrice's stepmother really wanted to go on that holiday. The stepmother said to herself, "Beatrice is so sweet that she makes my back tooth just ache looking at her. Every time she smiles with those dimply little cheeks, I want to throw up. She couldn't fail to win a sweetest princess competition." And so turning to young Beatrice, she said, "Beatrice, enter that competition right away and make sure you don't lose." Beatrice, who was not at all sure that she wanted to appear on television, especially as she thought the king would say that that programme was rather cheap and nasty and not at all royal, said, "Dearest stepmother, please excuse me. I would rather not." The stepmother, who was secretly furious, put on her sweetest smile, which actually wasn't very sweet at all, and said to Beatrice, "Please, Beatrice, pretty please, with pink bows and fluffy knots on it." Beatrice was rather surprised to hear her stepmother speak to her so nicely, as it wasn't her usual way at all. And she looked up from the pair of pink earmuffs that she was knitting for her favourite bunny and said, "Well, maybe." The stepmother smiled again, so that Beatrice could see her gold-capped teeth, and she said, "Oh, go on, Beatrice. Please, pretty please, with pink bows and fluffy knots and strawberries and cream on top." "Oh, well, all right then," said Beatrice, still not quite sure that it was a good idea. The stepmother was very pleased with this result, and said to herself, "And when she wins the holiday, as she most certainly will, I will put a spell on Beatrice, so she gets a tummy ache and has to stay behind. It will be just wonderful to get away from the horrid children for a whole month." But as the day of the contest drew near, the stepmother began to have doubts. She saw a picture of the other two contestants, Princess Daisy and Princess Theodora, and if anything, they looked even more curly, dimply, and revoltingly sweet than Beatrice. "Now listen," she said to Beatrice, as the maid combed her long golden hair. "Just remember one thing. If in doubt, cheat. Here's a mobile phone. If you need anything, just send me a text, and I'll put a spell on those other two nasty little princesses and make them come out in pulsating warts." "Oh, no, dear stepmother," replied Beatrice. "I couldn't possibly take a mobile phone with me. It's against the rules of the competition." "Hopeless! Just hopeless!" said the wicked stepmother. The idea of the competition was that the three princesses would be placed inside a huge palace, and the audience at home would decide which of them was the sweetest, kindest princess in the whole wide world. Except it wasn't really a palace at all, more like a lot of cardboard painted pink. Inside the cardboard palace, there were bright lights and remote TV cameras that followed the 3 contestants' every move. It was very strange, and Beatrice didn't feel comfortable. She was a bit afraid. She had never been on television before. But fortunately, she had brought her softest, cuddliest toy with her to cheer herself up. She waved faintly at the camera that had a little red light shining on it and said, "Hello, everybody. My only wish is that the sweetest princess should win fair and square." "Thank you, dearest Beatrice," said Princess Daisy, who had 2 great red ribbons in her hair. "It is very gracious of you to wish me good luck." Before the first test, they were given juice and biscuits, but when the camera wasn't looking, Theodora poured salt into Beatrice's juice, so that when she took a sip, she spluttered and grimaced most unsweetly. "Oh, dearest Beatrice, let me pat you gently on the back," said Theodora, smiling to the camera. Back home, in the real palace, the wicked queen was watching all this on television and cursing the sweet stupidity of her stepdaughter. Now the competitions began for real. The first task was to find a small animal to help. The 3 princesses stood at the beginning of the garden path. "Nobody is sweeter than me," wailed Daisy. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. No one is sweet as me," cried Theodora. Daisy ran down the path and came back a floppy little bunny rabbit and started feeding it scraps of lettuce. Theodora ran down to the pond and came back with a yellow fluffy duckling and fed it little baked French bread. When Beatrice went out to the garden, she didn't find any animal to help, and she with nothing at all. At home, in the living room of the palace, the stepmother screeched, "Curses! Drat! My magic won't work with all those bright lights and electric cables around the place, or I would turn those 2 little princesses into slithering worms or slimy snails, and then see how sweet they look." On the second day, the princesses had to raise some money for charity. Daisy went out to the street and set up a collection point, and by the end of the day had raised loads of money. Theodora set up a donation hotline, and by the end of the day had raised even more. But Beatrice couldn't find anyone to raise money from, and so at the end of the day she had nothing. "Oh, you're not sweet, you're sour," laughed Theodora. "You are useless, cried Daisy. And both went away giggling. Beatrice lay awake half the night. She didn't mind about the stupid competition, but she was worried about leaving the real animal rescue home she kept at the palace. She just wished that the television director would throw her out of the competition early so that she could go back home. Then, on the 3rd and final day of the contest, the princesses had to open a very important building. Daisy was whisked away in a carriage to a new hospital, and then toured the building, talking sweetly to all the sick children. And Theodora was whisked off in a big car to open a new school, and a day very sweetly helping all the children with their homework. But Beatrice couldn't find anything to open except for a new rubbish dump, and she wasn't sure that that was going to look very good at all. Still, she started walking towards the dump, even though it was a bit smelly. But just as she was approaching, she heard a tiny squeaking sound. She looked down, and there was a small rat, and she could see that he had broken his foot. "Oh dear," said Beatrice, picking up the rat. You're in terrible pain. I'd better take you back and get that fixed." "But you're supposed to open the rubbish dump," said the rat. "I can't just leave you." She took the rat back to the palace and bandaged its leg and gave it a piece to make him feel better. And when Theodora and Daisy came back, they looked at the rat and screamed. "Get that horrid creature out of here!" shouted Daisy. "But he's hurt," said Beatrice. "I don't care," interrupted Theodora, stamping her foot. I don't. Just then, the presenter of the television show came running into the palace, clutching a microphone. "You can relax, your Royal Highness. It's all over. The viewers at home have voted and chosen the sweetest princess." "I'm the sweetest," said Daisy. No, I am the sweetest," said Theodora. And Beatrice just remained silent, because it seemed to her she hadn't done very well in the competition at all. And the TV presenter looked at Theodora and he said, "Our secret camera filmed how you arranged for that floppy bunny to be placed in the garden just so you look good in the competition." And looked at Daisy and said, "The viewers saw how you arranged people to donate to your charity just so you would look good for the competition." And then he looked at Beatrice and said, "The only person here who has done a kind, unselfish thing and thought of others before themselves is you. And so the entire world loves you, Beatrice. Who would help loving such a sweet princess? You are the winner, Princess Beatrice, the sweetest princess in the entire world." And she was so happy, she even gave the rat a hug. And she looked across at Daisy and Theodora, and even though she knew it was a bit naughty and not very sweet at all, she stuck out her tongue and said, "Na, na, na, na." And you know what? Even the wicked stepmother cheered and thought, just for a moment, what a clever daughter she had. And that was the story of how Princess Beatrice became the sweetest princess of all. You'll find loads more stories on storynori.com. Until then, from me, Natasha, bye-bye.